Well, hello vinyl community, it's a rainy day here in the Bay Area and I have some records to show you. Starting off with a few items I picked up in San Francisco. I had to make a very brief trip there, so I wasn't able to hit all the shops I wanted to, but I did find this 1957 LP by the Modern Jazz Quartet. Beautiful glossy sleeve. And this came with the original inner sleeve showing Atlantic releases of the time and a discography. And judging by the albums listed, this is a pressing from 1961. And it is on the Plum Atlantic label. And at the same time I picked up this Anthony Braxton In the Tradition album. This is a 1974 recording. It was intended to be a Dexter Gordon recording session, but Dexter Gordon couldn't make it, so Anthony Braxton filled in. And he is playing standards with the rhythm section of Spanish pianist Tete Montoliu and N-Hop on bass, Niels Henning Orsted Pedersen, and Albert Tootie Heath on drums. He performs with both alto sax and the contrabass clarinet that you can see a portion of on the cover. So you get really bizarre versions of Ornithology and Goodbye Pork Pie Hat with that monster honking away in the ultra-low registers. And this is a Danish pressing. This is the original release on the Steeplechase label. This was released along with its Volume 2 on the Inner City label in the USA. And the final album that I picked up in San Francisco, a little krautrock from Kron. Wiederhören. In German they say goodbye is auf Wiedersehen, until I see you again. Wiederhören means to hear again. And I hadn't heard this album. The first track was a little disconcerting, it was pretty cheesy, but the rest of this is really good. That first track, it's one of the, I think there are just 2 vocal tracks on this, but mostly it's an instrumental album, very fusiony, very showy playing, especially from bass player Helmut Hotler, and this also features the late Ingo Bischoff, who recently left us, on keyboards. So this is pretty fiery in parts. This is from 1977, yes, 1977. Got a couple of Impulse Coltrane's to add to my collection. Impressions from 1963. This is a beautiful copy, nice and shiny, and the original pressing with the inner sleeve as well. And this was released in '63, as I said, but most of it was recorded. The 2 long tracks recorded at the Village Vanguard in 1961, the same run of shows that gave us the Coltrane Live at the Village Vanguard album. And the other that I received was the 1966 follow-up to that, Live at the Village Vanguard again, with the late lineup of Alice on piano and Rashid Ali on drums. And somebody please tell Jimmy Garrison how to dress. The man just doesn't fit in there. This is the second pressing, or the second label. I'm not fussy with these about whether I get the orange or the red label. I'm happy with either one. I certainly wasn't buying them back when those original orange labels were coming out.
Interestingly, on this album, Coltrane applies his avant-garde mid-60s approach to two of his more beloved melodies from the earlier phase of his career, Naima, the wonderful original ballad, and My Favorite Things. The intro on side one for My Favorite Things is Jimmy Garrison's bass solo.
On a related note is this 1972 compilation, promotional compilation on Impulse, titled Irrepressible Impulses. And this art side, which looks like a front cover, is the back, and the side with the liner notes and song titles is the front. All handwritten, and disgracefully, the word saxophone is misspelled everywhere it appears. Obviously, from the cover art, this is meant to appeal to a college-age audience, and it includes mostly shorter edits of tracks by John Coltrane, Alice Coltrane, Pharoah Sanders, John Clemmer, Ahmad Jamal, Cliff Coulter, Archie Shepp, Chico Hamilton, and Milt Jackson, and it is on that red Impulse label. Next up, some fusion from Jan Hammer. This is a wonderful album, very electronic. He makes a point that there is no guitar on here. I think he was trying to step out of the shadow of John McLaughlin. But this is really not so much fusion. This is almost a mixture of progressive and classical sounds. Electronic, very compositional, and some beautiful, beautiful synthesizer sounds. On the Nemperor label, interesting design with a blue label on one side and a sort of purplish red label on the other. Another keyboardist I've shown before a couple of times, Dollar Brand. This is a 1972 recording, Ancient Africa. Dollar Brand does like to mention Africa in his album titles. And the album itself was released in 1974 on the Japo label. It's a solo piano performance. Another artist I've shown a couple of times recently is Phil Ochs. And here's another one. This is his 1967 album, Pleasures of the Harbor. This is his first album for A&M after the traditional folk-type albums, Troubadour with Guitar doing protest music that he had done for Elektra. He moves to a more very produced format, and lyrically a more poetic and often surrealistic approach, kind of mirroring what Bob Dylan was doing in his mid-60s period. And this features the hit single, Outside of a Small Circle of Friends, which you may remember because it's his one charting single that made it all the way up to, well, not number 1 and not number 2. Okay, not number 10 or number 100, but it did get all the way up to number 118 on the Billboard charts. And that is what is called in the trade bubbling under. But the most remarkable track on here, there's, Dixieland, there's Cocktail Lounge piano, there's pop, And there's electronic music on the epic track, The Crucifixion. We've got an arrangement by Joseph Byrd of the United States of America, where he combines orchestration with musique concrète and produces just a stunning, stunning track. Phil Oakes's poetry is absolutely at its zenith there, and the song uses the crucifixion of Christ as a metaphor for the assassination of Kennedy, and it doesn't look so much at the assassination itself as the public response to it and how it affected society, and how society affected it. The use of alliteration in the song is particularly notable and really virtuosic, right from the opening lines. And the night comes again to the circle-studded sky. The stars settle slowly, in loneliness they lie. Great, great words. This copy, you notice, still has the shrink on it. For nostalgic reasons, I bought this sealed, and when it arrived, I knew it was not going to be the pressing I wanted. For nostalgic reasons, I want the original, so I'll keep this one until I can upgrade to an original. This is the later label. In my last video, I showed some music from the French Baroque period that I found rather lightweight and wasn't planning to hang on to. Here's the real deal from the French Baroque. Jean-Philippe Rameau, he was a contemporary of Bach, and this is the suite from the opera Dardanus. The music is all instrumental. It's not the singing parts of the opera. And this is performed by the Collegium Aureum. And they use original instruments, and I really like their sound, because one of the first classical albums I ever owned was this copy of the Brandenburg Concertos as performed by the Collegium Aureum. So that, in my formative years, gave me a taste for the original instrument approach to Baroque music. This recording is on the Victrola label. That's the old Victrola label. And even older is this pressing I picked up at the same time from the 49-cent bin of the Franck Symphony in D. This is a piece that I've been listening to a lot lately, just dialing up different performances on YouTube. Wonderful symphony, but one that just hasn't really stuck with me, and I'm spending some time trying to come to grips with it. This is a really nice performance. Guido Cantelli. I like the recording. This copy of the record, old RCA label, looks nice, but it's just got too much noise to be a really enjoyable listening experience. So I've already got another copy of this symphony on the way. It's a very weighty, very stately piece of music. So very big 19th century symphony that I think does have a lot to dig into. And along with those two, I picked up this album. I got this one still sealed on the 1750 Arch label from Berkeley. John English and Candace Notvig Triptych. Candace Notvig plays violin and sings. John English does trombone and electronics. The first piece is a solo for Candace Notvig. The second is a collaboration between the two, and side two is all John English. And this is very minimal, focuses a lot on repeated notes, low dynamic ranges, and drones. 1750 arch label and inner sleeve with liner notes. Next up, some electronic music from 1968, again on the Victrola label. This is John Pfeiffer Electronomusic. John Pfeiffer was an engineer for RCA, and he got a chance to put out this LP of his own music, and let's hear a little bit of what he has to say about it. Electronomusic, a new but obvious name for musically organized sound built from electronic technology. The label implies sonic results which differ markedly from electronic music. They do, but other differences apply even more to the aesthetics of sound formation from which the ultimate musical architecture is built. New devices, manipulations, methods of sound organization. The hardware of the system was conceived on a new musical aesthetic, one which intends to bridge some previous musical experience with the new freedoms of electronically oriented sounds. It may be as valid as any new musical philosophy. The validity lies in the listener, the seeker of meaningful oral sensation, musically communicative sound. Okay, that's enough of that. This is mixed, to be charitable. Some of this is really frivolous sounding. The longest piece on it, however, is a 13-minute track at the beginning of side 2 that's really nice. It reminds me of some of Klaus Schulze's early pre-synthesizer work. Last track is just kind of a hoot. It's based on the sounds of a telephone. But Pfeiffer is very coy about not telling how the music is made. He doesn't give any technical specifications, and he has pretentious made-up names for the instruments on each track. The first piece is for inharmonic sideband, the second for contraformer, programmer and signs, events for parametric blocks, metric transperformer, modes for allformer and set, a duotonic transform, sequential signs. That one's obvious. He's using a sequencer to produce repeated patterns from an oscillator, and ordered simpliformer. That's the telephone one. Contraformer sounds basically like a piano played through a ring modulator or some such. Again, Victrola label. Finally, another composer I've shown a couple of times before, good old Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. Serious. And you can't take it too serious because the cover seems to be upside down. And there's old Karl-Heinz on the beach. Does he have his Speedo on or not? We'll never know. There he is at the controls. And here are the performers of the work with sort of a Sun Ra look going on there. This is a piece for 4 performers with an electronic backdrop, and the performers are bass vocalist, soprano vocalist, Marcus Stockhausen on trumpet, and Suzanne Stevens on bass clarinet. This has a lot. This is a very talky piece. It's almost like listening to a Firesign Theatre album in places. Actually, if you know the Frank Zappa album, The Yellow Shark, the bass vocalist sounds exactly like the parts where Hermann Kretschmar does recitations. So I got a little extra giggle from that. And we get lots of liner notes, impenetrable justifications, diagrams, and scores. Sweet package. Of course, on the Deutsche Grammophon label. So that's it. Thank you once again for putting up with my blather, and I will talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now. Be well.